if you look at so many things in this world, and in the last 10 years since the 2008 2009 kind of financial recessions, right? Financial crisis in 2009 2010, and then straight after it, the world's just gone so fast again. All right, and you can see it. Every nation has shown much faster. GDP has grown. You know, we went from the looking out for the billionaires to everybody trying to cross the trillionaire and everything else. And just things, and what happens is when everybody just keeps running on like the kind of like the rat wheel, you know, you keep going and going and going. You sometimes don't stop to things, and we get caught up with growth instead of planning the growth, instead of taking ownership and saying making decisions towards growing, right? People just get caught up, and whatever you do, you don't have time to question what you do. You don't think about it. So I think for me it's been excellent because you stop. There are so many things, and I'm sure as a host, as a talk host, I'm sure you've heard of so many people who have made changes in their life, both personally and also in their work. That's just been good. So I think that I'm a big believer of you rest to work, not work to rest.
Mhm.
So I think that, you know, just as every year we all have our summer and we take time off and all, this could be just as, you know, we wouldn't be the first recession. What induced it doesn't matter as much as the world just needs a rest. And
Mm.
yes, there has been, especially for developing nation, there has those they really the impact has been felt more. And but I also see the world coming together to do things together, community, grassroots, and those are things that, if you notice, people don't seldom do people take time off from very very busy schedule to do things otherwise. And that has been what that has that you've seen it in many people doing things within the community, not waiting for the big institution to help, but on a community level, grassroots level, people have taken initiatives, and that's been good. It's good for both the people volunteering and also the beneficiaries, and this is what we have seen. So in that way, I see many good things too. Like on two sides of the coins, you see the problems, but as I said, the other side of the coins, I see more initiatives, and I think people are able to take the initiatives when they come together for what's important to them,
Mhm.
and that's humanity, right? So
Absolutely.
that's good.
You pointed out quite interesting couple of points as far as getting together, and we are taking a pause, as far as the speed of what we used to do, the things that we are chasing for, and that's quite interesting way to look at it, right? At the same time, you have a business that you're running, due to this particular situation, perhaps it has taken some kind of effect. I don't know if it's a positive effect or a negative effect. How do you think about your business pre-COVID situations, and now you're thinking post-COVID situations, and how do you see those two sides?
Yeah. Today, you know, and my LinkedIn, I've got a ton of people who wrote and say, "Oh, congratulations on the work anniversary." So look at the work anniversary of moving from I used to work in the fashion industry, and then um, for a while, and then I moved into technology space, and the work anniversary is 17 years, all right, that I've been in digital. And what we've been doing is really helping the world to actually, or the fashion world to actually look at sustainability, be think about digital transformation, think about lean way of doing things, do things right the first time, all those buzzwords that's been around for 17 years, right? And the truth is, in all the 17 years, we've learned that it starts with change, and people a lot of time people have difficulties. They don't change. Even when you put a carrot, ahead of them. Some will change, most won't change. But what prompts the biggest change? It's when there's fire on the back, right? When there's a crisis, and that's when people pause, switch. They pause, they think about why, they think about the things that they normally don't think about. So the pre-COVID world, in all the 17 years, quite honestly, I've seen crisis. This will not be my first crisis, right? So I'm not that old, but this is not my first crisis, right? And in each crisis, that's what I say. Before the crisis, you talk to people about change. It all makes sense. There's great benefits to it, and you would think that people would jump at it, and some do. There are people who are just really just good at doing that, right? And they were like, oh yes, I can see, a couple of years ahead, and we know that we're going to be growing. They take charge of the change. They take charge of their growth. They don't get caught up in it. So I have a client who's become a very close friend, and I remember when we first worked with him, he told me, he said, you don't have to just tell me all the benefits. I know why I'm meeting you already. Now I want to tell you why, where I want to go, and why I'm doing this, so that you partner with me and get me there. Now that's how many people do you think actually comes to me and
Yeah.
tell me that? That's excellent. So when we sat and we talked, it was very clear. My boss has given me um, where we are going to go in the next 3 years. We are going to grow 50, 100%. In 3 years, they were poised to grow, I think at that time, almost 4.5 times. And that's the plan set in place. They know what's going. Now, what in his mind, with such a growth of top line, he needs to think about in parallel, how do we grow? What kind of structure do I need to get there? How many people? And when he started thinking about that, he started with where he is today. How does he run the business for his, I can't remember how much he was, but let's throw a number. Let's say to run my store right now, it's to reach $100 million. I'm running an organization that has a burn rate of, let's say, 80. And then he's thinking, so if I'm going to do 4.5 times for 450,000, I'm going to bring my cost up, unless what? Unless I change. Is there a better way to reach the 4.5 times? Now, that's the kind of conversation. What's that? It's interesting. So we sat down, we talked about it. So in his mind, it's very clear. How can I get to 4.5 times the growth, but growing my burn rate, not more than 2 times? What are the things that I'm doing now that I can change? Now, that's really answering the why before you do digital transformation. Well, a lot of people, and I've spent quite a number of years in my life, all right, talking to people about why they want to change. And most people see digital transformation through a software demo that someone does for them, through a solution, or through, I love the Oracle and SAP's advertisement. It's all over the place, big billboards, and you see the big cars, and you see all the, and 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 that's what they see. So I want to go faster, like Hussein Bolt. I want to go faster, like that Audi car that SAP, that's powered by SAP.
Yeah.
I want to do all that, but I I want to do all that because I'm inspired. All right, but how do I? But why? Why do you want to go faster? And so this is what I mean by we can get caught up with running faster, doing more, growing, without first asking ourselves, why do we want to grow?
Mhm.
Because if you don't ask the why, I think that, and then you will, because you don't ask the why, you don't measure, you wouldn't start thinking, how do I want to measure my growth? Where do I want to grow? How do I want to grow? If you don't measure, if you don't start thinking about all these things, you end up getting caught up, and getting caught up in an economy that's just bustling and growing. You just get dragged along by the wave, and it's, for some it's great, but for a lot more than for the few, that's great. I've seen more destruction. So you see the world do more of the wrong thing again and again and again, but now magnified. So that's the reason why I see as well that you take a broken system and you grow it a lot more. You produce a lot more waste. You produce, it's totally unsustainable. You pollute more. You do all the wrong things more. Why? Why do we do that?
Yeah.
Right? So always start with why. Now, if you start with the why, you answer all the questions. What you're doing is you're actually getting behind the wave. You're actually in charge of your next 3 years. You're going to grow not just because you get caught up in it. All right. You're taking charge, and that's how you're growing. And so I see companies that have taken charge in this way, meaning they get always behind the wave, and they're riding it, but they're not getting pulled for it. So when a crisis does happen, they're so in tune on how to move that plan, all right, so quickly that they're able to manage through this. So you have winners definitely out of this COVID. You've seen it. And then, of course, you have losing now doesn't mean losing forever, okay? But you do have people that gets the wake-up call. And I think what's important is to ask why.
Mm-hmm.
Take this downtime, realign, ask all the questions, and then start again. Because things that the services that is needed by this world is not going to go away. The product that is needed by this world not necessarily will go away. But what you can do is start thinking, how do I produce something better so that I could still give to people what they need without in a more sustainable way? Can I, for example, I'm in the 3D technology business, and I'm really in the business, a big part of my vision has to do, I look at the fashion industry and I say, wow, this guy's, and I came from this industry for a few years. And I look at it and I say, well, what most of us do is that we buy based on the forecast, and we stuff it into the store, and then we hope to sell. And of course, most of the time it doesn't work out. That's why we get, we start marking things down, right? But if you're able to sell without even making a single piece, all right, through digital, online engagement with your consumers, once you're able to do that, and then when someone buys, if your back end, your supply chain is also equipped to be more digitally equipped to be agile, then what happens is that you can take what you just sold, push the digital files, bill of material, everything else backwards, and then have someone produce it because the production line is attached to IoT. There's all this great technology that's available to enable people to make. Now it may not be having the ability to make it within 24 hours, some within a week, 2 weeks, but it really doesn't matter. If you don't even get Amazon Prime, most of your delivery comes in a week later.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a possibility of a world where we design differently, where we sell differently, where we make differently. And if we can bring this all into a closed loop and connect things together, wow, it's powerful. We will not be, I believe the climate change activists will not be shouting, it will be just so different. So I think from businesses, this is the opportunities that digital can bring to you, a more sustainable growth that you can grow, and then yet still keep the earth, growing with you, because we really don't want to be the only one here, and I have no intention of going to Mars.
Mars. There might be a better incentive here, right, to stay here.
I know. And it's such a, for the billions and all, that people are throwing into going to Mars, I look at it and say, hey guys, let's channel to do what we can here.
Yeah.
And I've seen quite a lot of that too. So always two sides of the coin.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about the sustainability, especially with the fashion industry. We see a lot of waste,
Mm.
that otherwise is not necessary or not necessary to even produce, right? So I also happen to speak to one of the fashion industry founders. He's into AI space, and they're doing simulation of different designs of clothing, and so forth. And you guys have similar kind of stories, and so I just got that point of sustainability from her. But at the same time, you mentioned a big why. The big why is very important whenever we are going through any kind of transformation, and perhaps that's the driver for us to go forward with any transformations. And sometimes we see that companies are doing it because their competitors are doing it, and they don't have the reason to do it, for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, there are chaos. As a result, you spend money that otherwise was not necessary. And how do you prepare a company, based on what you've said, but how do you prepare companies going through transformations, so that the employee underneath are also ready?
Mm. Yeah, it's this is the you're asking for the magic formula. I must say that, I must say that there isn't, but I will say this. I think in general, everybody understands that digital transformation starts with people, process, and technology. I'm sure you've heard that, right? And but when companies, a lot of times companies do not, I think, ask the why question. It's really difficult to attack the first people. It's not just about rah-rahing them to change, because change does take time. It's allowing the people to take ownership of that first. And while you can say, oh, this is what we're going to do, and people, a lot of time people are hoping for a promise, that will come through something more plug and play. Why? Because they're not they they're not given an avenue, they're not given the space, they're not given the time to actually make the change. This becomes um, transformation, or depending on how they do it, becomes another thing on the plate. Whereas if you're really going to transform, and if you really want to transform, you need to take steps back, ask the why question, and then bring the opponents for the change, right? Bring people who will say yes, the advocates who will say yes, this is what I want to do, this is why I want to do it. Now, will the company give me the time, the space, actually for me to not just start learning how to make the change, but when I start learning, whatever is the platform that you give to me, I need to learning the platform is not making a change. Learning the platform is the first exploration to what can I change based on the tools that's been given to me. So, okay, based on the tool, I can now do this. So then the doing part needs the planning to come in. But most company thinks that here's the tool. So with this tool, you should be able to, you should transform. No, the tool needs, the tool is the spark to see what else can you, if with a paper and pen you can't type, or you can't go fast enough. But here's a computer, and here's how you use it. Now that you have this, how would you change how you communicate with someone? Now that I give you a phone, now that I give you an email, how would you change the way you work? Now, it will not just be typing a message. It will be, how did I communicate with a person with regards to a certain matter, maybe on onboarding? How can I use email for onboarding? How can I use, what some of the new skills that I've just learned, creating a template. Now I can do a template, and I don't need a photocopy machine. So many aspects, so many dependencies change. All right. Now, why people get frustrated? It's not a lot of time is because they take the first step, they see the possibilities, but the dependencies of a current world or the past world, all right, is all there. And then you take a step, and then someone say, no, the machine's got to be there all the time. So you're not changing it all to email. No, I still want to have my photocopy. No, I still want it printed out. There's so many dependency because the entire transformation of all the other dependencies have not come along. So the tool is the first part. The tool given to the people is not the start of change. It's the start of exploration. Is the start of asking, okay, now that I have all this, how can this help me to do, not just me, but how can this help all the other stakeholders who work with me? And those are big questions to ask because we've been used to a certain way of working. And when you want to make a change, you realize it's not just on one person, right? So you need to bring process change, and you need to bring other people, not just that one group that needs to change. Others around needs to change. The entire process needs to change. And that's why I tell people, quite honestly, the technology exploration is usually the last part. All right. You take it, you start understanding, you map up your entire environment, you ask all the why questions, you map it to what's important for your company. All right. Another thing about I find in when a tool is given is that the reason for changing or for giving a tool or a platform is not clearly articulated to the team. So the team have no idea why they got something. I'm not kidding. Really, it's a strange thing. People have no idea. And you go in and I hear stories like, oh, we went in and trained, and the group is like, what's this all about? No one have a clue what's going on. So no one's, forget about even mapping. No one's even asking again, who made the decision? No one knows. So you see this happening in some companies, right? And our advice to companies is always communicate the change before the change happens. Set some expectancy, talk to people about why, see if they all agree that this is it. You don't need a consensus, but you do need to map why, because your organization is run by people. It's not run by machine, right? And the other thing I think is really important, which I don't see as well, is I don't see initiatives that are mapped to a high enough goals that impacts, what keeps people awake, or what keeps the leadership awake, which is just basically revenue, costs, and risk. It's never mapped to the risk. It's never mapped to business. Only this one guy I told you at the beginning of the story. I seldom see a guy like that. Okay, I seldom have anyone come be proactive. I normally take time to actually lead them to that stage. Yeah. So how many people actually could say that I'm going to grow 4.5 times? I know I don't want my cost to grow 4.5 times, and that's all equivalent, and that's the reason why I'm coming to you. We need to map this out. So I'm going to grow, but I'm also going to have a good bottom line, right? So which means that I will address what some of the things that are business as usual for me, which carries a lot of risk. So I'm going to address risk, and I'm going to address costs, and I'm going to address revenue. Those are fundamentals. Impact to revenue, costs, and risk are fundamental to wanting digital transformation. And not enough is mapped to this impact. And when you don't map it to impact, it becomes the ROI becomes, okay, what can the tool help me to go faster? Okay, it may bring you faster, but it doesn't bring you a holistic change. And digital transformation is really holistically changing. It's a holistic change. You must be able to say that I have completely changed the way we do business. COVID, one of the great things I found in COVID is we used to, pre-COVID, we deliver all our projects pretty much on site. Yes, we have some digital learnings and all, but most projects are delivered on site. In COVID, all right, all our projects were delivered online. Now, prior to that, most companies would tell me, Sharon, it cannot be done. No, you have to come on site. You and your team's got to come on site, and you need to do certain things and all. So our delivery model was mapped to such expectation, right? But lo and behold, here comes COVID. So guess what? Everyone sent home to work. We still gotta do we gotta do what we gotta do. So what do? We move it all online. And if I look at it, hey, that's a real transformation for us because we quickly gathered together. We put a few more pieces of digital learning together, which was super fun. And, we changed the way we look at things, that we changed the way we delivered our business to clients. And what does that mean? This has given us more agility, all right? And for people on the receiving end, they've now have something that they're learning and doing something they otherwise used to think it's not possible.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
so this is why I said that it's good. COVID, it's good. In many ways, it's helped address and spark off the slow down, ask the why question, and then start really testing out, really moving into the transformation. You know, one thing, an article that I wrote um, maybe a month or two ago was also about how it was strange that companies have invested so much in digital transformation. And in the time of COVID, I know business have a hard time, but in the time of COVID, people were letting go of putting people on furlough or, or laying off people who were the very people that they invested in taking them or educating them in transformation, right? Digital transformation, right? Were the same people who were let go. It's amazing. You
Yeah.
spend 2 years and then you let your experts go. Now, please tell me, how do you plan to live post COVID?
Yeah.
You want to come out of post COVID. You don't want to get dragged by the waves. At the same time, how is this possible? How is it possible that you did not even keep, the very thing that you have invested that will help you thrive post COVID, to prepare to thrive? So, but it's a so I after talking to a few people, I felt that you know what, I really needed to write something
Yeah.
about this because it's crazy. You just shot yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by digital transformation. I know it's on the lips of so many people. It's such a buzzword, but I would say that you have really changed. If you can say that you're really transformed, if you really can measure your revenue, costs, and risks pre and post COVID,
Mhm.
then you can talk about yes. Then you can give yourself a pat on the back and say we've really transformed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really comes down to thinking about, your own business, your surroundings, and the people that you have, the kind of culture that you have, within the company, and then you're being prepared to even go a little far and say, hey, what, I can also change my business model, right? So it's just your mindset that drives you from taking that step, saying, okay, my offerings are not going to change. Maybe the way I offer is going to change, towards the client, right? And how do you see those mindset differ from company to company, or what are the recipe that makes certain individuals a little bit more resilient, thinking ahead, and some, they're just taking the formula that is available and then, rolling on with that.
Yeah, I still I think in the last couple months I've talked to people who have really taken charge, and but these are traditionally, I think, not I think, I know that traditionally these guys have always taken charge of their growth,
Yeah.
right? So they've always looked ahead. But I've also talked to many who have not traditionally taken charge of their growth, all right, that when a crisis hit, they've also they're still pretty much looking at the crisis. It's burning, it's burning, and what's the next step? So naturally, some of them are reacting as well. That okay, the only way I can do it right now, I just have to go digital, and they are doing that. They are doing that. But what I think the right thing to do as well is to, it's great to take the first step, but now as you take the first step, the management or the leadership also needs to, normally the execution ones are the guys at the bottom, right? They execute, so they start changing. Then here comes in a crisis that the leadership haven't gone ahead of that as well. So they're still looking at the here and now, and here and now is a problem, is a crisis. They're still looking at the crisis. They still have not taken the time to really explore where can this go. What does that? What will look different in the fashion business? Whereas what I've seen when talking to some of them, maybe smaller company or even new startups, independents, what's been interesting is that they've taken this opportunity to say, hey, this is how I can sell. Taking it online, social, the thing with the guys in TikTok, it's amazing. Social e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen some people who've just changed and they're like, oh, this is possible as well. All right. And whereas bigger enterprise are still looking at the here and the now. That is the truth. So I think that it's inevitable that you will have the different mindset. Some that looks at it and say, we will thrive post-COVID. We want to thrive post-COVID. So let's open it up. Let's look at every initiative that we have done uh, because of the disruption in COVID. What have we done to overcome it? And if we have overcome it in a few months, things that we never tried before, and we tried to do something because it's just such a disruption. COVID has disrupted us so much that we had to pull every trick under the hat, right? In the hat, we just had to pull everything out, and we had just had to try everything. And some things worked. Let's review what worked, because if they worked as we were disrupted, we have a pretty good chance of taking it further right now to thriving post-COVID. And there are companies, I had companies when I asked them, and they came back and they tell me things like, well, everything's put on hold, Sharon, we can't go on. But I said, but are you stopping your business? Are you closing shop? Are you stopping to sell? No. So I said, so are you stopping development? Are you stopping design? Are you stopping? No, we're still doing it, but we're stopping, investment into anything new. So you're continuing in a crisis to do the things that you had problem with pre-COVID. You think that in COVID or in crisis, you're going to continue the business as usual, carry all the risks. How does that make sense?
Yeah.
I asked them, how does that even make sense? And they're a lot of time they tell me that I can't help it, Sharon, because my boss says so. The CFO says so. So I said, guys, unless you want to close shop, you had that's it. You want to close shop, close for a couple of months, go take some breaks off, clear your head of where you want to go. I can understand. But every day that you're still continuing business as usual in a crisis, you do realize that you accentuate your risk so much more. I told them, why? It doesn't even make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Companies like that have absolutely no answer for me.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is they really go back to business as usual. Now they say that, oh, we'll come back to you, or we should be better next year. But why? What makes you think, if you haven't changed the formula, that next year 2021 will be better? You didn't plan your growth. Again,
Mm-hmm.
you didn't plan. You didn't go, you were caught up again by the waves. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't go behind the wave. You did nothing. So I think we will see this as well. It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
I see, typically with the large corporations like banking and, the insurance sectors, they're traditionals. And like you mentioned before, we would need those services even after the post-COVID
Right.
situation, right?
Right.
And you see some, let's say, startups like on this particular space that are they're offering something that it's hard to resist those things, right? And yet, when I look around those big corporations, they've not fundamentally changed, over the years. How do you see the transformation of bigger companies as such, where fundamentally nothing changes, and then you see some smaller wolves coming into the picture, and then they take it over?
I think what stops them, it's all the reasons that they have. I would say that the biggest of it is tied to fear.
Mhm.
I've always done, when you say that I've always done things in a certain way, it's not that you don't want to do things differently. It's just that you don't know.
Mhm.
So a lot of it is tied to fear of I can't take something I already know. I used to have a boss a long time ago, and he used to tell me, Sharon, don't fix what's broken. What's not broken? Don't fix what's not broken. I said, look, it's not about fixing what's not broken today. Some things perhaps you need to break in order to have bigger growth. You need to
Mhm.
build something else for bigger growth. And he, I don't. He used to think that I was just. I gave him a lot of too many whys. So I think with traditional industry, it's inevitable. Anyway, we are in a digital era that we are in today, and it's ushering in a world of opportunities. Those who will embrace the new challenge of learning and exploring the digital world, I'm very sure, will gain the benefits of the new opportunities as well. And then you will have those who will still have the fintech. You talk about financial services and insurance, because of the many compliance that they've been laden with in the traditional world, that they will do things in a certain way. They may not want to change fast enough. But you also have the new that will come in. It's inevitable. We live in a digital era, right? 4.0 is powered by the digital technology, all right, and we usher in a world of 5.0, where we can introduce new business model, when we can introduce new opportunities, things that we never thought that we could do before are possible, and the barrier of entry is brought lower. The barrier of entry is so low that the newbies will challenge the incumbents. Enough of the newbies doing things a certain ways will become the new way of working, right?
Mhm.
And you also have to know that it's consumers as well. You have consumers that are older, all right, that will still prefer to go line up in a bank, that will still want to bank with a guy, that have a building that I can see. All that is fine. But at the same time, you also need to, the newbies, you also have consumers who are younger, who somehow don't, who likely would place more emphasis on new way of engaging with them, new business model, new models that you are introducing to them, than the older way. So it's both engagement and also the benefit, or the new model that you're giving to them in banking.
Mhm.
All this, or insurance, all this are reality. You have both. So when when the value of one overtakes the value of the traditionalists, you will see that's when the mass adoption starts to happen. So by then, a tradition, or company that if they have not changed, or even looked at the change, or believe in themselves that this cannot change, then what you will find happening is, eventually you will find that the newbies will become the incumbent. All
Mhm.
right, and you will be scrambling to find out how to change, because digital transformation requires you to also learn how to change, right? So you need to, most of the newbies would have by then built up digital foundations when you are still in an analog world. Imagine the amount of effort that you will take to now catch up, because they've caught up and they've gone 2 miles ahead of you. The work to do will be so much more. as compared to, when they are behind you, right? And you're looking at the new, all right? While they are behind you and you start building, I think that's a shorter effort as compared to when the disruption happened, when the mass adoption of the disruption happened, then you start reacting. You realize that you literally have to burn the house down
Yeah.
and rebuild.
You are an entrepreneur, and you meet a lot of people, and you have to imagine yourself, pre-COVID one more time, and then you are now already spent like few months, into this pandemic world. Uh, what has COVID taught you overall?
As an entrepreneur, I found it interesting that actually the culture of the company has always been changing. When I'm talking to some people this morning on my team, and they said, "Wow, COVID is we're kind of like settling down." Why do they say that we're settling down when the rest of the world is thrown into an upheaval? The truth is because we are so used to change. We're so used to change. I'm so used to change. I remember that even the spaces in the office. All right, I used one in a 1 year. I'll just tell I said, guys, I think it's time that we change the office layout. So what we will do is we'll get our roll out our sleeves and we'll start changing and start taking half a day or maybe a day to start redrawing where we will all sit, where will the tables go, who will change what table. We'll start changing things, even down to that. And for us, we used to do it like twice a year.
Mhm.
Start making changes, and it's very much a part of our culture. In all these years, we've kept. It's pretty much in our culture to change. And as we've 17 years ago, people in the fashion industry were not even thinking 3D, and we stepped into this space. What a sharp contrast. So I think if we were not keeping ourselves really happy with all the changing, making changes down to even layouts in the office, down to when we have lunch, and down to what we do, if change wasn't a part of the culture, we would be, I think, in the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, all the way to to COVID now, we would have problems. But why my team says that we're settling down is because we are all sent home, working from home and all, things a bit more settled. I'm not making them do crazy things. They're not proposing to do crazy things. We're doing things, a lot of things, but making a lot of changes. But that's why it's settling. And I think I like that culture.
Mhm.
I like when we are used to making changes, not for the sake of making changes, but that means that we have the time to actually think, constantly think. We have the space, and we have that space. We have time, and we have support to make changes constantly. So I think, if anything at all, COVID has taught us that such a culture has actually been a very good culture for us. So as an entrepreneur, and definitely COVID has pushed everybody, pushed many people of the industry into digital thinking, digitally thinking, or starting to think digital transformation. It's been good for us. Um, but it all starts with what we've realized for ourselves. It all starts with us living in a certain type of way, living in a way that we want to think about transformation and change first, and not waiting for a crisis to hit us before we do anything.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that we are all zooming now. uh,
Yeah.
yeah. um, Something that in the past, when we get people to change, everybody will be late into meetings simply because they can't figure out online meetings.
Yeah.
So it take them 10-15 minutes to figure out. This day is amazing. I don't
Yeah.
care. Even if it's a 70-year-old guy, he comes to the meeting on time because he knows how to do it. That's amazing. Zoom did an excellent job in COVID. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that no, we are all using this amazing technology now in order to work, in order to do everything, right? So everything that we are trying to do is based around this virtual sessions that we have, and companies like those are benefited, quite a bit, and it's interesting, the way they are better placed, some win, some lose. Now, coming back to your interest towards a little bit into the technology space, you mentioned you are coming from a more of a fashion world.
Mm.
So what was that moment like? Okay, I need to also explore this technology space. This is it. I'm not going to do anything in the fashion now, and I'm going to jump on that bandwagon, and then and then hopefully I will succeed. Or it was more of a curiosity.
All right. Okay. So I actually, prior to fashion, I stumbled into fashion, but prior to that, I spent about 9 years in consumer electronics.
Ah.
So I'm not fashion trained in any way at all. But definitely when it comes to manufacturing, supply chain, and I have a lot of experience with that. Then coming into the fashion world was like taking a little ride on a time machine backwards. It was really, and I couldn't figure out why things took so long. I couldn't figure out some of the um, traditions that they have, runway 4 or 6 season a year, some of the particular things, peculiar ways that they had. I found it quite intriguing, and when I came in I thought it was a walk in a park.
Mhm.
uh, but when I came in I realized that it fundamentally it should be a walk in a park as compared to consumer electronics, where any device that I touch in consumer electronics would have bill of materials that is, if I print out, we stopped printing already a long time ago in consumer electronics. But if I print out the way the fashion world print out, I would be printing manuals.
Mhm.
That's bill of material, right? And when I come to fashion, it's, yeah, a couple pieces of paper. You think
Mhm.
that it's really easy, but I realize that it's not, because they're all trying to guess what each other are talking about. So they live in a very 2D kind of a world with words and with sketches, and therefore everything becomes very subjective.
Mhm.
And that's where the fragmentation in processes happens. That's where the fragmentation in collaboration starts to happen. That's why time is taken up. There's so much time taken up. Whereas when I came from the electronics industry, the engineering world was using 3D. Back in the, when I came out, it's in the 90s, late 80s, 90s. Okay, I'm giving too much away, but okay. But
Yeah.
this was already how people were working around 3D. Every little parts, and there was great visualization, but there was great communication, and that's how they produce fast. That's how they develop and do things fast, right? Lo and behold, I come, in late 90s into fashion. Yeah, I came into fashion in the late 90s, and what a surprise that everything was still 2D. Everything was still data, and everything was still flat 2D sketches and flat 2D cats. That only people who, if you were the one who drew the sketch, you would know exactly in your mind what you're talking about. And then you would try to dump it in data and in words as much as possible to try to communicate that in in your language, knowing that someone else who receives that would try to have to translate it into their language and try to imagine what is it that you want. And then the 2D cat, it's another amazing piece. It's, unless you're a pattern maker, no one else would know how to read that unless you were specially trained in pattern making. So you had all this data that only certain people knew what they were talking about. And imagine trying to pull everything together. How did they try to do that? They did that in a sample, all right, by making a garment. And then, okay, that's not exactly what I want. Then they start communicating, no, that's not what I meant. No, that's not what I meant. And this whole thing, when I came into the fashion industry, I realized subjectivity. If you want to take and resolve quite a lot of problems, bring objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do it? And so when I look at it, it's nothing new. I just took what I knew from the engineering world and I looked at it for the fashion world. But fashion did not at that time definitely not look at 3D technology, and neither would they, because they needed to have the prediction of how the apparel would fall on a body and so on. Then that technology was not available.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought differently. And this, long story short, why I kept looking around for technology that can help, it's because I found that this was the problem. The problem I had to solve
Mm-hmm.
was subjectivity. If I could solve it and bring objectivity, the entire time frame would change. And I found it when I found Browzwear in the maybe 2000. Yeah, 2000, 2001. That's when I found them. And that's when I found them, being from the technology world, being technology people who are not of the fashion industry, or not of the people who are buying or knowing them, I decided I would help the technology people translate that. I would bring them into an industry that's really analog, and we would try this whole translation process and change management. Bring technology into this world is a transformation. And then how do we do all the other fun stuff, go to market and everything, put all the pieces together, bring enough POC with different type of companies, and how do we do that? So I discovered Browzwear in 2001, and I hopped on in 2003 I started,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's where I get my 17 years on record.
Damn, that's a
But
long
17
time.
years, yeah, but 17 years more of with more mistakes. I tell my clients, I tell my prospects, and I tell my clients the reason that they come to me is not because I have a lot of trophies, but because I have a lot of war wounds or whatnot.
Well, and learning, like you've said, you go into the transformation because we have a big drive towards it, right? So you have a sole purpose to fix certain things that otherwise was, not possible, right? So you brought this idea about getting this 3D stuff into the fashion world, and and then now when you look back and you sort of talk to your clients, how do you see their reaction as far as before you met them and you sort of brought this technology to them, and then now when they are using it, they're comfortable with it, how do you see their reaction?
It's just at COVID time. All right, I had one client and I quote him. He said that you guys are not the cheapest, but I have to tell you this. In my opinion, you are the best because, all right, I'm able to achieve what I want to achieve. I would not be in business today if I did not change the way I work.
Mhm.
I think that's great testimony.
Yeah.
And yet, in the early days, it wasn't mass market for us. Back in the early days, it really wasn't mass market for us. But we were very fortunate, and I think we were fortunate because there were always people feeling the pain of subjectivity in the industry. Day in, day out, they're feeling the pain, right? I wasn't going for the mass market. I was going for people who are ready for change.
Mm.
So we're always sussing out people who are ready for change, and that's what we did. That's what I mean by I'm not going to get caught up, with buzzwords. And we had at that time competitors who are not even there, not even around today,
Mhm.
and they were all caught up with buzzwords and mass market. But this has changed.
Mhm.
It's changed for us right from the beginning. We were very clear about it. So with change, we have to meet readiness. And so we have a process of sussing out who's ready, and we went with those. So I must say that we've been very fortunate all the 17 years to have customers who started with us back then, still with us today.
I'm curious now. You just said, we have a process to know like who's ready. I'm actually curious about that particular process.
Yeah, you know, okay, I can't tell you. Well, okay, only because you know we have like 3 minutes left. But remember the
Yes.
story. Remember what I told you about why people change, right? It's either you put a carrot in front of them, or you put a crisis, you put a fire behind them. That's when they change, right? So yeah, in some way we've mapped out questions like to help us to understand whether it's the carrot that makes them move or whether it's the fire that will make them move. And what I prefer to do, I think back in those days, what I prefer is actually to find those who are motivated by the carrot,
Mhm,
right? Because for the fire, I guess I have to wait for crisis like COVID, all right, to
mhm,
do that for me. And that's what COVID really have done as
mhm,
well. So we, it's about finding the ready customer. So I would say for entrepreneurs, your show is also looking at tech entrepreneurs and all. You have great ideas, and when you have great ideas, test it out. Have
mhm,
people who if a customer's buying from you or saying yes, I'll sign on with you, it's just simply the number that the order represents or the sales represent. It's only a validation that you're doing something right.
mhm.
That's what it does,
Yeah.
right? And I would say that you take that and you look at that as really a validation point, right? And then work. And when someone gives you your first order, really, they become a design partner for you for your business. And
Mhm.
you go into that business, working with them, helping them to succeed will help you to succeed.
It was wonderful conversation and a lot of insight. And I really like the story that you have. You know, you've worked in the fashion industry for some time, you know, using this technology. So, you know, I want to wish you all the best and all the success you have in the future. But it was a pleasure talking to you today.
It was a pleasure to me too. And let's keep in touch, okay, Pramod?